context of white supremacy, Gus T. Renegade and Justice in to share constructive information about racism, white supremacy, what it is, and how it works. Thank you for tuning into the program. Before we get started, I did want to let folks know, for the people who caught the broadcast over the weekend about the Asian female and how her image was represented in the University of Washington paper, I spoke with her, and she has agreed to come on the program and share her views. She felt very much mistreated, and I think it's going to be great to hear her views directly. So that'll be coming up soon, and I think I will actually be making an appearance on her program, so stay tuned. Our guest for the evening, always an honor to have him on the program, opportunity to learn constructive information, author of the United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept, Mr. Neely Fuller, Jr. You're with us, Mr. Fuller?
Yes, I'm here.
Outstanding. How are you dealing with the snow?
Oh, we're making it through it.
I feel you. Yes, I wanted to hop right in. I was speaking with some victims of white supremacy, and Roots, the movie Roots, the movie and book Roots came up, and just thinking there are a lot of lessons. You always talk about watching films that have lessons, and there are a lot of lessons about racism, white supremacy in that movie. I was just hoping if you could share your thoughts if you saw the movie, read the book, lessons from Roots.
Well, if I recall, it's just a dramatization of slavery in a series, and about, if I recall correctly, the ships that came to the shores and picked up black people at random, chased them down and whatnot, wherever they could find them, and put them aboard the ships, and then took them to where they could serve the southern public at that time, and the southern states and throughout the islands. But principally, they pointed out that it would be among what we now call the southern states, and distribute the slaves among people who wanted slaves for plantation work, and that was the way they had them, and they treated them as slaves have always been treated, in a very distressful and punitive manner. And that's the gist of what I recall the series was about, what their experiences were. That's just about it. I mean, it was just a way of continuing what had been all down through history, recorded history. I mean, a lot of people gathered up slaves of some form or another in order to do the work that needed to be done, and to do it in a cheap and, for them, an efficient manner, and not having to pay them or not having to regard them as persons who had any rights of any kind and whatnot. It was a pretty efficient machine. And that concept has continued even to this very day, particularly the concept based on subjugation of people on the basis of color. Over a period of years, it has adopted the term or the label white supremacy and or racism. And that's just a form of slavery or a form of mistreatment of people based on color. Even when there's no work being done, it's still a legitimate form of mistreatment, considered to be a legitimate form of mistreatment that has no repercussions for the mistreater. That's just a concept. It's called racism and or white supremacy. And that's the continuation of it that we have today. However, it probably didn't start with the scenes depicted in the movie series Roots, the TV series. It started, some people have said some 450 years prior to that. Some others have said 1,000 years, and some people have said as far back as 6,000 years. So I don't know. But you could find some form of racism, picking out whatever part of history that you would want to pick out, ever since there have been people on the planet in large numbers who decided that they were going to exercise the form of royalism, which is what racism really grew out of. It's just another form of royalistic dispositions or perspectives. So that's mostly what I got out of the series. It's just a depiction.
Okay. Were there, I know when you speak about The Godfather and Shawshank Redemption, you point out specific scenes that have lessons that people should pay attention to. Did you remember any parts of the book or scenes from the film that had lessons you thought were important?
Not particularly, because just the lesson of slavery itself, based on subjugation of people based on color, was the prominent lesson. So that lesson stands out. When I said something about studying various movies, I meant movies also that depicted nothing about slavery or about racism. Wasn't even mentioned in a lot of movies. Movies, everything from The Godfather, The Casablanca, many of the Academy Award winners have a lot of lessons in movies in general, if you know what lessons to look for. Lessons that are universal, lessons that all people can learn from, if they pay attention to the scenes and the lessons. Citizen Kane has lessons, and it's not about race per se. I don't think there's any scenes there that even alluded to it. But there are lessons to be learned. There are lessons to be learned in most situations, and certainly in a lot of the fictional movies that have been made, some of them based on fact and some of them just based on imagination, about lessons to be learned. And that would include movies like Shawshank Redemption, movies like even a lot of the World War II movies, 12 O'Clock High, From Here to Eternity. Lots of lessons just about people in general, because ultimately we're talking about people in general, because we're talking about people in general being on the planet. And all people, when you study history, the history of all of the people on the planet should be studied for the lessons to be learned. The things, and what lessons are we talking about? Things that shouldn't be done and things that should be done. Those are the two categories. Things that should be done and things that shouldn't be done, and why. That's the only reason for studying any history at all, anybody's history. Things that should be done, things that shouldn't be done, and why. Ultimately, with it in mind that you're supposed to be on this planet to produce a product that's never been produced in recorded history, and that is a product called justice. And the definition, compensatory definition that I use, that I made up, for lack of a better one, was guaranteeing that no person is mistreated and guaranteeing that the person that needs help the most gets the most. Hello?
Yes, sir. You cut out for a moment, but we can hear you now.
Yes. I was talking about justice. That's the whole purpose for everything that everybody on the planet should be concentrating on, for a very logical reason, following the logic. That's the one major thing that's never been produced that needs producing. Lots of things have been produced, spaceships, all kinds of electronic gadgets, all kinds of electronic entertainment toys, et cetera, but the treatment of people has never been really concentrated on. I mean, in a massive manner, so that people keep in mind that we are here. Theoretically, everybody's here to guarantee that no person is mistreated and that the person that needs help the most gets the most constructive help. These are the reasons for the existence of people on the planet based on just what's in front of us until we are given a better reason. I can't think of a better reason right now, since that's the missing link. That's the thing that has everybody stressed. That's the thing that where we have these continuous conflicts and where people have many, many locks on their doors and people cannot walk the streets at night without fear of something awful happening. Shouldn't be that way. Nowhere on the planet. But it's all taken for granted in popular culture, the popular cultures throughout the world, particularly wherever black people are, that this is natural. Some places, among gangs and all like that, it is celebrated that this is what's considered the way to live. This is what is considered life. You look forward to it. Going out and killing people in the street and then run and hide and laugh about it. That's considered civilized activity to the extent that it is considered civilized. Most of the time it's not considered at all as being anything except just a way to do things. Since you're here on this planet and you figure you got to be doing something, why not do that? And then you have people who are well-versed, so-called educated people who look forward to amassing armies and going into battle and slaughtering people and then waving flags and talking about how great you are, as in the ways of the old Roman Empire and the Greek empires, building up in order to tear down over and over and over and over and over again, endlessly. The system of racism is designed to do that type of thing. It's mass insanity, and everybody's gotten used to it.
Our guest, again, Mr. Neely Fuller, Jr., I agree. We are under a system of racism, white supremacy. I was thinking that as you were speaking, you said that this is a problem amongst people. That's what you're talking about at the end of the day, a problem amongst people. And I feel like a big problem that victims of racism, white supremacy, a big problem that we have is failing to understand what racism, white supremacy means on a personal level when they have contact with white people. I feel like white supremacy means that if you are a non-white person, anytime you come in contact with a white person, you should suspect that that white person has a lot more power than you as long as the system of white supremacy exists. Do you think that's accurate? And could you share your view on that statement?
Yes, it's accurate because of the system of white supremacy. That's what white supremacy means. Being a white person is supposed to have greater value than being a non-white person. Everybody on the planet understands that by now, who has ever been exposed to the concept of racism. You'd have to come to that conclusion.
Mr.
And
Fuller,
it's a system that is based on the royalist idea.
Mr. Fuller, I didn't want to interrupt you, but I feel this is real important. I feel like a significant, and I mean more than significant, I feel like most of the non-white people that I know do not understand that a white person in this system, just any random white person, a white person you're around every day, that white person, those white people have a lot more power than you. I feel like most of the non-white people that I know do not understand that that is what white supremacy means.
Well, because they don't understand it, does not say that it's not true, or rather, it doesn't. It says that it's either true or false. Now, the statement that I made is either true or false. I have taken the position based on studies, based on everyday observation, based on everything I've ever heard and seen over a long period of years, that there is such a thing as white supremacy. Now, that statement is either true or false. And everyone who has heard anybody say that, not just me, should just check and see if it's true or false. Because it's a very important thing to find out if that is true or false. Because if it is true, then there's a serious problem on this planet, worldwide. And if it is false, then there's no need for NACP or any of the rest of this. Black History Month or anything, any people talking about blackness or anybody talking about affirmative action or diversity or any of these. You can just take all of that. Just take all of that and gather up all those words and descriptions and whatnot of a situation that doesn't describe anything and then throw them all in the trash can and declare that none of these concerns warrant any attention at all. So that's the only question. See, everything in counter-racist codification, that's what I call it, is supposed to be based on truth. If it's not true, if these things that I have said, and maybe some other people, about the existence of white supremacy and what that means, orders of activity, economics, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war, worldwide. Now, either it exists or it doesn't. There's no way to split it down the middle and say, well, there's a little bit of it. There's no such thing as a little bit of white supremacy. It's either or. Either you have it or you don't. Now, if you don't have it, then people like Neely Fuller have been grossly misled, either by someone else other than himself, or by himself and other people, or by other people. Or he just made it up. He all concocted it in his own mind, and he's in his own world, and he has no contact with reality. But people can easily find this out simply by not taking his word for it at all, which is what I always recommend that people do when I say anything. Do not take my word for anything. Start with the presumption that I could be making it up, everything that I say, and then go out and check and see if it checks with what they are looking at on an everyday basis, wherever they happen to go. Could be that I'm delusional. Could be. I leave the door open for that. And it could be there is such a thing as white supremacy in all 9 areas of activity that operates worldwide 24/7, and that the non-white people are subject to that system. Now that's a flat statement that's either true or false.
Again, Mr. Neely Fuller Jr., context of white supremacy. I wholeheartedly agree, and if there is no such thing as white supremacy, I have been misled as well. But I agree. I think the evidence speaks for itself. And when you say go out and test it, just in your lifetime, has it been demonstrated that everyday white person, the white people that you look at every day, that you go to work with, that are your neighbors, that take out the trash, just the regular old white people that you see every day demonstrate that they have a lot more power than you?
Yes, but it's not demonstrated on the surface. It's demonstrated in conglomerate. just like members of an army. You might see, I mean, even in an opposing army, you might see someone taking out the trash. You might see someone being abused. You might see someone drunk who is a member of another army, you might say, or of an army that has you under subjection, or as members of a law enforcement force, what they call, quote unquote, a term that I don't particularly care for, a police state, or the warden and the guards at what you call a penitentiary, a prison. Now, the prisoner may look through the bars and he'll see the warden berating one of the guards for dereliction of duty and withholding pay or giving punishment or suspension. And the guard may be crying and saying, hey, I want to hold my job. I mean, give me another chance. And the warden says, well, I'll do it, or I'll think about it. But right now you're going to be under suspension, and we're going to take away your pay for 3 weeks. Now here's a prisoner watching through the bars, the warden talking about one of his co-workers and berating that co-worker. So that the prisoner on an emotional level may even feel sorry for the guard. Might even like the guard. But the guard is still a guard. And the prisoner is still a prisoner of war. There's still a difference there. That difference is not always recognized, but the difference is there.
Wow. Wow. I guess one thing I also wanted to illustrate that I think is true under the system of white supremacy, I think the most accurate definition for black in terms of a classification of people, or Negro or African American, I think the most accurate definition for that term is a black person is whomever the racist white supremacists designate as so-called black. Do you think there's a more accurate definition for the term black?
Black, according to what I have written, means non-white. And there are shades of black. Brown, beige, so-called red, even though I've never actually seen a red person. But I guess to some people, maybe Christopher Columbus, there were some people that looked like they were red. They were probably most likely anywhere from light brown to dark brown. But that's the tag that they received. You might have beige, tan, on and on and on. There are some terms usually used when you're talking about something that is not associated with people but with things. Like if you're talking about paint, you have eggshell white. You have off-white. I have often asked the question, when you say off-white, what do you mean? Something is either white, or some person is either white, or they're not. There's no such thing as off-white. How far off? 20 feet? 17 miles? What are you talking about, off-white? What does off-white look like? Off-white must be non-white. But it's not considered to be non-white. See, so it's more a political term than a strictly genetic term, because there are a lot of black people who are considered to be black people who are also considered to be albinos, and visually speaking, looking at them, their skin color, quote unquote, or non-color, is whiter than, quote unquote, white. So are they white people? Is an albino black person a white person? What are we talking about here? But sometimes even the white supremacists, almost, but not completely, But on occasion, they may confuse themselves. But mostly they spend time confusing their victims. So these debates about the paper bag and all like that is designed for the victims of white supremacy to argue about. The white supremacists determine who's white and who's not. They are the only ones that do. And they can determine that and change it around and shift it around any way they want to, simply because they are in a position of what? Supremacy. So they make the determination about who's white and who is not. Nobody else can make that determination.
That was
based on evidence.
Yes, sir.
I'm talking about evidence.
That is, I agree completely, and I just wanted to point that out. I feel like the white supremacists, the most powerful white supremacists, they make the classifications. They determine who is black, who is not white, and the overwhelming evidence supports that, and they can change it as they see fit.
Sometimes in a half a day, and then change it back again the next day.
Yes, sir. Yes.
That's what you can do when you're in a position of power.
Yes.
You can change whatever you want to change.
Mm-hmm. Wow. I feel like if you understand that aspect of racism, white supremacy, non-white people would begin to reflect that in the way we behave, the way we speak, the way we think about white people. And the behavior that I see non-white people exhibit on a regular basis, it seems to suggest that we don't understand that. And I think just some of the way we interact with police, I think, it seems like we really don't understand when we come in contact with enforcement officials what white supremacy means, that you are in a vulnerable position as it relates to white people. You have a lot less power than the white army anywhere in the world, anywhere in the known universe. And we seem to demonstrate that in a real pitiful manner when we come in contact with enforcement officials. Could you share your view on that?
Yes, and it's codified too, exactly how you should act at all times, without exception. And that is comply, both by word and deed. Do what you're told. Get out of the car. I don't care what kind of names I call you and all like that. If you're told to get out of the car, get out of the car. If you're told to put your hands in there, put your hands in there. If you're told to halt, halt. I mean, these demonstrations after you have been killed make no sense at all. Shot in the back of the head while running, while fleeing. And woe is me. Police brutality over and over again, decade after decade. Stop playing. There's nothing to play with. Put your hands on top of the car, put your hands on top of your head, drop to your knees, whatever you're told to do, for a very logical, and I'm going to emphasize, logical reason. You're in a vulnerable position. You're not in position to show opposition. And when you think that you're in position to, 99 chances out of 100, you are going to lose big time. Now, we haven't learned that by now. Then we need to take some more lessons and have what I'm saying now repeated over and over and over and over and over and over again until it sinks in. Because of what? The evidence. The evidence shows that running down the highway with a helicopter overhead usually gets you nothing. Stolen vehicle. Barricading yourself in some type of house or hut. And talking about you not coming out. The record shows you come out, dead or alive. And then people gathering around, throwing themselves over caskets over and over again, photograph after photograph. Mothers, aunts, cousins, homeboys with plenty of dreadlocks and tattoos, throwing themselves over Catholics, over caskets, coming by an open casket, rest in peace. On the fence, teddy bears, candle lights, speeches about something got to be done about it. Stop playing like you're tough when you're not. That's the message. You're a prisoner of war. Act like one. Name, rank, serial number, hands in the air. You've been captured. Don't act like you haven't been. They've already got a make on you. Already got your fingerprints. You've already been computerized for life. Don't play like you have some kind of secret army, because you don't. You're alone. 3 sets of blinking lights. Get out and do what you're told. And no lip. None. Prisoner of war. Show some intelligence. But even as I speak now, there's somebody out there who isn't. Driving down the highway 40 miles an hour, driving up in people's yards and all like that. They're going to be dead in the next 5 minutes. And the report's going to say, it looks like he was going for a gun. You already know that. Why act like you don't? Everybody out there who's doing that kind of stuff, who's within the sound of my voice, that's who I'm talking to. You know the routine. Don't play like you don't. We play too much. Play, play, play. Everything is a movie scene. About nothing. You haven't done anything? What are you running for? If you have done something, what are you running for? How far do you think you can run? To the moon?
Wow. One of the big ways that I see our failure to understand that white supremacy means, if you're a non-white person, you are always behind enemy lines. I think sometimes non-white people, we get to where we want to just talk real loud, act like we have that army stashed away somewhere that's going to come out and protect us. I'm black and I'm proud, get away from me. Just, not just with obviously we do it with the police a lot, but I see a tendency to do that just with white people in general sometimes, to try to act like we're tough and got that secret army. And I feel like that really is a sad illustration of our lack of understanding of white supremacy. Can you kind of share your view on that, and why you don't? I've never really heard you, speak really wild or get loud with a white person.
The most impotent creature in the form of a person on this planet is a black male. Period. No matter where on the planet they are. The most powerless person is a black male. The most powerless person on the planet in the form of a person is a black male person. But you see them walking down, picking up the sidewalk, acting like they can whip everybody. Sure, they can whip somebody who looks just like them, because that's permitted. Permitted by whom? The white supremacists. They don't care. Kill everybody in the neighborhood. So what? There's another black neighborhood gone. There's another one down the street, ready to go. What's the big deal? You better be careful about whose face you get into when you get carried away with what you can do to other black people. And what's pitiful about it is most of us know that. Very few of us don't know that. We know whose space to get into. And we know just about how much backing we have. Black person in handcuffs. All kinds of tattoos. All kinds of long record for being able to whip everybody since 9th grade. Standing there in handcuffs, in an orange jumpsuit, in his best hairdo, saying, "Yes, Your Honor." Why don't you use the kind of language toward Your Honor that you use with the people that you encounter right there in your neighborhood? The one that you say that you're a master over. The one that you can terrorize. All the females flocking to you and halfway scared of you. Knock them around all over the place. Call them all kind of names. Why don't you call Your Honor that same name? Snatch him from behind the bench. No. See, we're great show people. Greatest show people on earth. 3 9mm, one in your sock, one in your waistband, one in your side pocket, ready to take on the entire world in a movie, in a homemade video, or passing a bus stop full of black people fixing to go to work, or you can terrorize them. Why don't you take on the champ, which usually is just 1 or 2 white supremacists who just come and say, "Now, I think you'd better behave because you're disturbing my peace. Now, if you don't think I can handle you, try me." And I haven't been on this planet forever, but I've never seen a situation on a large scale, or never heard of one on a large scale, of any significance throughout the history of the black male, because that's who I'm talking about, who didn't chicken out in a moment of real crisis. So I don't want to hear it in this stalwart Black History Month about that all-powerful black male, because I've seen our record, particularly in the last, I'll say, just in this area of the world, 60 years. Now, we've had a few who did things the way that they ought to be done. They protested in the street. They carried signs. They talked about non-justice. Martin Luther King, people like that. Fannie Lou Hamer, as a black female, backing up black males who got out there and tried to do something that made sense, rather than just terrorize the neighbors. And that's doing what we're supposed to do from the weak position that we have. Only time we show all this bravery is when we are mistreating other victims of racism. For the most part, some exceptions. Nelson Mandela, exception. Martin Luther King, exception. Malcolm X, exception. A substantial list, but well-spaced. Well-spaced. All those black males in between, usually the ones who are doing hard time, if you look at what they are charged with, most of it is mistreating, whether they're guilty or not, but most of it is for mistreating other prisoners of war, the race war, people that look like themselves, can't stand themselves and want to kill everything that looks like them and laugh about it and call it an accomplishment. Now, I harp on this because this is one thing that should be real passe. As they say in the hip-hop culture, I think they call it whack. That's really whack. I think that's what they call it. Makes no sense at all and has been embraced in every generation. Didn't just start. As far back as I can remember. Black male carrying the Saturday night razor. I'm going to cut me somebody before the night's over. Oh, yeah. Who are you going to cut? Who are you going to cut, Jimmy? Who are you going to cut, Mac? Well, I'm going over to the dance hall. Who's in the dance hall, Mac? I'm going to cut me somebody who breaks bad over at the dance hall. Who is it that's going to break bad in the dance hall, Mac? Somebody that looks like me, somebody I probably went to school with before I dropped out, and they dropped out. So we meet up 18 years later, and we slash each other to death in the alley. And that's supposed to be a big deal and the purpose for being on the planet. Now, there are millions of black people who think just like that. And they are not all just in this area of the world. They are south of here, in places like Brazil. They look forward to that kind of foolishness. It's an old black tradition while we're talking about black history. That's a huge part of black culture. It needs to stop, and it needs to stop as of tonight. We need to do some thinking and then say enough of that. Been there, done that. Forget it. No more gang tattoos. I mean, who are we fooling? Who can we really whip? A very limited number of people. And certainly nobody who is smarter and more powerful than we are, particularly somebody who is really an army. A system of white supremacy. You know anything about taking that on? No, nothing, zero. Better start tap dancing.
Wow. Again, I guess a privilege, Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. I wanted to highlight something that you said there. You said the most impotent figure in the system of white supremacy is the black male, and actually this was back of the bus. He said that you did not say non-white males. You made a distinction and said specifically black males. You don't feel like just non-white males in general are in
non-white males in general, and the darker they are, the ones who carry the label of black. Sometimes they're not dark ones. I mean, some of them are very light. Some of them look like they're white, but they carry the label of what we call black, if you just want a double whammy. Anytime you get that category, and you're talking about a black male, you're talking about somebody who big bulging muscles, lots of tattoos, heavy voice. I mean, shake the walls with the way that they talk. You would think that they would know everything with the way that we talk and swagger. And like I gave the illustration before, walk down the sidewalk, taking up the whole sidewalk, want everybody to move out until they meet somebody maybe about 100 pounds lighter than them, much smaller than them, but the person is white. Now, all of a sudden, you know how to act. That's why I say it's an act, because you pick your place. You wait till you get somewhere close to the hood, and then all of a sudden you become powerful. Why aren't you powerful everywhere you go? Some black males never even dare step outside of what they call their turf. And when they do, when they're forced to for some reason, all of a sudden they become very sane, very cautious about how they go about doing things. It's miraculous. They become a whole nother person. Which means that the black male in the Northwestern Hemisphere in particular, the ones that I observe mostly, and the one of which I am one of, and been among most of my days, we know how to conduct ourselves under certain circumstances. Magically. We may not know exactly what to say, so we keep our mouths shut. We know when to do that and what environment to do it in. Which means that we are excellent actors. So we act like men when we're really whimpering boys. Because when we go up against somebody who's a real man, we chicken out. And we do it almost consistently every time, and we do it every day. Strong black male doesn't exist.
Do the racist white supremacists, did they decide who gets labeled as a black person, quote unquote? Is that an accurate statement?
What's the question again?
Do the racist white supremacists, do they decide who gets labeled a black person in the system of racism, white supremacy?
Do the white supremacists decide that?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Yes. When they have census, I mean, it's the white supremacists determine. Now, black people make proposals about what they're going to be called, but it has to be okayed by somebody white, presumably, at least a suspected white supremacist. Because when you start talking about classifications, that's very important. The system of racism demands that there be racial classifications. Actually, there's not supposed to be any, by logic. Race is racism. The only purpose for being a member of a race is to practice racism. And the only purpose for practicing racism is to mistreat someone based on color, if you follow the logic. Race makes no sense at all, except within the context of mistreatment. If you want to be a member of something, you can be a member of a tribe. You can be a member of a work gang. You can be a member of a school board. Lots of things to be a member of. You don't have to be a member of a race. What are you a member of a race for? What are you racing against? What are you racing for? So the way it's played out on this planet has been in the form of some type of mistreatment. So when you say you're trying to join a race, you're saying it's like joining a gang to do some gang banging. If you ask a gang member, why are you a member of a gang, you'll probably get the answer of, well, I do it for protection. Protection against what? Well, against other gangs. Other gangs who are doing what? Who are gang banging. So then it becomes obvious that the purpose for gangs is to gang bang. One gang kill members of the other gang. The purpose of a race is to mistreat people based on color. Serves no other purpose that anybody can think of. None. If you're going to be truthful.
Wow. When you, in my view, were speaking honestly about black males being the most impotent figure in the system of racism, white supremacy, quite a few folks, you've been on your 8th appearance on the context of white supremacy. Some of the folks who've heard you on previous broadcasts they wrote in, these are non-white people, they wrote in and they said that when you make statements like that, saying that the black male is the most impotent figure in the system of racism, white supremacy, and when you make statements saying that white people are the smartest people in the known universe, collectively speaking, saying that the system of racism, white supremacy is the greatest material system to ever exist among people, that when you say those sort of things, you sound like you are full of self-hate. You sound like the racist. You sound like you have just given up and you have no pride in black people and you've just given up and you're burned out. And they wanted you to respond to that. What would your view be on those statements?
Okay, give me each one of those statements individually because I like to keep everything clear.
Okay.
They say that Fuller does what?
The first one.
Number one.
Number one, you have given up and do not think this problem can be solved because you talk about black people as though we are so pathetic and impotent and pitiful.
Okay, hold it right there. That statement is false. Now, let's look at some evidence. I haven't given up, or I wouldn't be having this conversation. Why have a give-up conversation? When you give up, you just give up. Stop saying anything. Just go around with your head hung down all the time. That's giving up. I wouldn't have written a book talking about how to go about ending racism and producing justice in its place if I had given up. Now, that's some evidence that I haven't been given up. I'm just going by the evidence. That's a serious charge.
Yes, sir.
I say that charge is false.
Okay.
And the evidence shows that I've been doing this for some time and making suggestions about how to correct something that needs corrected.
Yes, sir.
See, I just didn't say what the problem is. I said what the solution is. Because why talk about a problem without introducing a method of solving the problem, which is what I have done, at least conceptually anyway, since nobody has solved the problem. I'm putting my 2 cents in, and I think it will work. That's why I wrote a book. That's why I came up with a concept. So there is some evidence showing that just maybe I haven't given up. Okay, what's the next thing that was said? Number two.
Number two, okay. Number two, that it is not true that the system of racism, white supremacy is the greatest system amongst people that has ever been created, materially speaking, producing things. That is not a true statement.
Okay. Well, I think that the statement that I have made is that so far in modern history, it has proven to be the most powerful force for motivating people, for better or for worse, that the world has ever seen in modern recorded history, as far as I know. And it certainly is a fact now, the way that I see it. Now, if that is not true now, and here again, it's a hypothesis, then that means that something else is. If white supremacy is not the greatest motivating force, then there's another force that is the greatest motivator. And I'd like to know what that force is, because I recognize that it's a system of white supremacy. So whomever says that that's not the greatest motivating force, the most powerful system that's in place now, then that means that there is another more powerful system. There's a system more powerful, because when you say more powerful or the most powerful, then that means you have to name that system. You should be able to name it. I say it's the system of white supremacy. Somebody else probably has discovered that's not so. There's another system more powerful. I'd like to know what it is. And that includes religions. Name one. whomever is making these statements. I'm just going by the evidence as has been presented to me. But here again, maybe I haven't seen the evidence that has been available to someone else. And if there is some evidence that contradicts this, I would certainly like to see it, because then that means that we're working on, or at least I am, working on the incorrect problem. We've got another problem somewhere. You always want to focus on the biggest problem. I say that's the biggest problem. Now, if there's another problem that's bigger, I'd like to know what it is.
Outstanding. By the way, the people that made these statements, or at least the person who made the statement about white supremacy not being the greatest system, he did not list what system is greater. But hopefully he'll call in. He can share that.
Yes, by all means, because, see, we don't need to be chasing shadows, or chasing phantoms. Here I am writing a book. Spent many years doing it, been on talk shows and all like this, talking about something that doesn't exist. But I will certainly apologize, and I say never ask for an apology, but I will certainly offer one. First of all, to myself, and say, boy, have I been misled. And I would like to get on the case of where the problems really are and center on those. I would really like to recognize just where the nerve center of all this mess that we are in, when, the need for talking about having a Black History Month and some type of Civil Rights Committee and EEO Committee and Black Caucus and all of this. Maybe this is all a bunch of nonsense that doesn't need to be addressed, because racism doesn't exist. And people like Neely Fuller's going around making it all up. And if it does exist, it's a minor problem. So if it's a minor problem, that means that there's a major problem. We need to find out what that major problem is and who's causing it. And that's who we need to be working on. And I will certainly join in and do it. But I think the system of racism is the most important problem. And until someone shows me I'm in error, I've been on a wild goose chase. I will admit to it. I don't believe in it, in holding on to something that's not true. No one who has the correct intentions should ever do that. I'd like to think that I have the correct intentions. Now, what's the third one?
Third one, that Neely Fuller Jr. is self-loathing. That's a direct quote. Self-loathing. Did you care to respond to that statement?
Absolutely. And have earned it. What else would I be? I'm trying to improve. I'm not satisfied with me. Why? Because I haven't done my job. I haven't ended racism and replaced it with justice. So, I'm my own biggest critic, which I should be. When you haven't done the job that you should have done, then you should loathe yourself. The first step toward becoming smart is to admit how dumb you are. First of all, to yourself. This is why people go to school. This is why I answer the phone saying I'm still learning. That's not for the person that I'm talking to. That's for me. There's a job that needs doing. It's been dragging on for centuries. And when I look at myself in the mirror, I have to ask myself, why do I allow this to keep going on? Why aren't I smarter than I am? Why should the mistreaters of this world be in charge of everything? And I'm in this world with them, and just watching it go by day after day, and I haven't figured out what to do about it. No, I don't have anything to be proud of. Be a proud prisoner? A proud prisoner of war. Too many black people, particularly black males, have been proud prisoners and proud of being prisoners. In fact, trying to be a prisoner. Want to be a greater prisoner. Doing things that will get them locked up and get into a place where we love it. No, I'm saying we should bust out of all of it. We've got to get smarter than we have been in order to do it. That's the formula. The formula that has worked all down through the centuries, through the history of the universe. You get smarter than you already are and stop celebrating whatever status you happen to have at the time. That means you'll stop doing anything if you're proud of what you are already. Because when you enumerate it, if you're a black male in particular, what are you proud of? Proud because you're black? You didn't have anything to do with being black. Now, try to enumerate something that you did. And the list is short, even for the best of us, when you compare it to all the work that has to be done. And you can tell that just by looking around wherever we happen to be. I'm talking about following logic. See, when we stop personalizing everything and just look at our overall condition, and we tell the truth, we have to say, it's a lot of work to be done. And compared to the amount of work that needs doing, we haven't even gotten started. And that includes people that do all this talking like Neely Fuller. Particularly him. Self-loathing, you better believe it. I'm entitled to a ton of it. That'll get me going so that I can do something like solve this problem. What problem? The race problem. Single-handed, if I can. Waiting on somebody else to do it? No. Why haven't you done it, Fuller? I don't know. Maybe I'm too dumb. You better believe you're too dumb. So get busy and get smart. Figure out how to do it. Alone? Yeah, alone. By yourself. That's the kind of standard we all should set for ourselves. That's the kind of standard I set for mine. Do it by yourself. The whole thing. All of it. Figure out how to do it.
Wow. I guess Neely Fuller Jr. I wanted to just make sure I heard that correctly. That's the standard you set for yourself to, if you can, single-handedly replace the system of white supremacy with a system of justice?
Sit down with a blueprint and try to figure it out from scratch. Blank sheet of paper and a pen. And figure out exactly how to go about doing it. And if you can't, consider yourself dumb and entitled to self-loathing. Certainly not entitled to walk around with a big banner saying, I'm the greatest, with no track record to prove it. Zero. The laughing stock of the world.
Okay. I know one thing I've heard you say consistently, and I know your work and your presentations, your efforts to counter racism have been extremely helpful for my sanity and being more accurate in things in life. But I've always heard you say that Neely Fuller Jr. is not an expert on racism. No non-white person is an expert on racism, white supremacy. Even telling people who say, yeah, I think a lot of of Mr. Fuller, and I think he's greatest counter-racist ever. I feel like you've always been very quick to say, no, I have a lot of work. I'm still learning. And I am not an expert on racism, white supremacy. Is that accurate?
The only experts on racism are the racists themselves, because they do what they do, and they do it very well, to perfection, and they have been doing it a long time, and nobody has figured out how they do it, and certainly not how to stop them from doing it. With all the people who have come down the pike, I mean, you can certainly say that they made an effort, many of them. Most people haven't made any effort, but some people have made the supreme effort. I mean, being killed trying to do it. But nobody has become an expert on what to do about it yet. And the racists are still doing their thing. They're the greatest show on earth. They have taken on all challenges, so far successfully. So it calls for quite a bit of head scratching and then getting down to business of figuring out how this thing is all put together and how to take it apart and replace it with something that should have been in the first place. That's the order of business. At this point, 2010, we shouldn't get credit for effort. That includes Neely Fuller. You only get credit when you come up with a formula for solving the entire package, which means you got to get a whole lot smarter than you have ever thought that you ever could be. Self-loathing? Well, I can't tell other people to loathe themselves. They can go around and say that they are the greatest heroes that the world has ever seen. I'm not going to do that. I'm not trying to be a hero. That's not the goal. I'm trying to solve the biggest stumbling block to justice that the world has ever seen. And I don't know how, but I'm trying to figure it out. And that's my job. Stopping to praise, I just want to say this, stopping to praise myself for 5 minutes doesn't make sense. When we haven't even put a dent in this. Now, a lot of people say, well, that's not so. We got a black president. I'm going to say it again. When you talk about the immensity of the problem, we haven't even gotten started, because the problem is just that big.
I just wanted to, I'm also in the business of replacing the system of racism, white supremacy, with a system of justice as soon as possible. I wanted to point out, I think one of the ways the system of white supremacy, one of the ways that it continues to confound non-white people is that we are conditioned to argue and bicker with other non-white people. And I see that play out even amongst victims of racism who are somewhat informed about racism, white supremacy. They still have a great tendency to just want to argue and bicker with other victims of racism about their view on what should be done about this problem or anything else. Can you share your view on that and how you've observed that play out?
I have a codified statement that I use that I borrowed out of the movie The Hustler, where a character named Bert Garden made a statement, and I kind of paraphrase it. I call it a sport enjoyed by all. That's what I call it, when black people argue with each other about who knows the most about what to do about racism. Black people love it. And it's an excellent excuse for not trying to solve the problem. Just find another black person to argue with and disagree with and show how many books we read or what we know or what we learned on the street or wherever. When we start talking about race, we love to go at each other. That is a simple formula and a sport enjoyed by all. It's a sport. You don't know as much as I do about what to do about racism. So you shut up and let me talk. A sport enjoyed by all. When black people talk about racism, that's who they want to talk to. They want to talk to other black people and show how much they know. Each and every one want to show that they are smarter than the other black person about what to do about racism, or what they know about racism, or what they know about black history. You ain't the one supposed to say quitting time. I'm the one supposed to say quitting time. And at the end of the day, with the sun going down, say we'll meet up again next week and do the same thing over and over again. But are we solving a problem? The answer is absolutely not. So Monday morning, we all got to face the people who really know about racism, and that's the racists themselves. And no matter how smart we claim we are to each other, we don't know how to say anything to them that will work against racism, and certainly don't know how to do anything. But the sport enjoyed by all, going at each other, hey, wonderful. You can do it and fall down exhausted and feel like you've really made an accomplishment. I really told those black people off at the meeting tonight. I made them all shut up. Okay, big accomplishment. What are you going to do about the white supremacists, mister? You figure that out when you face them alone. What are you going to do? That's the question.
Author of the United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept, Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. I think a concept needs to be shared on this program. I mostly have white people on the show to talk about racism, white supremacy. I think I agree with you. Talk to the experts about racism. You learn a lot. But because of that, I had not shared your concept of VGQ, and I think that in a system where I think it's accurate, non-white people, if you attempt to counter racism, you should expect to be attacked by a lot of non-white people, the sport enjoyed by all, in squabbling and bickering about views on racism. VGQ can be a very helpful tool in dispelling that. Can you please share your concept of VGQ and why you think that's important?
I came up with the concept because of what you're talking about right now. I saw that going on over and over again in barbershops and everywhere else. All of the experts on racism, all of them black, all of them shouting and cursing at each other, over and over and over and over and over again, year after year, ad infinitum. And I say, now, is this really getting anything done? Is this really the solution? Just trying to win arguments, barbershop arguments? And I didn't see any evidence where it did. So I say, now, has anybody come up with a formula for actually interacting with the white supremacists on a daily basis where things start happening that breaks down racism and results in progress toward the production of justice. So the VGQ factor is victims guaranteed qualification. I made up that in a compensatory fashion. Victims guaranteed qualification, meaning what? You're guaranteed the qualification of saying anything that you want to about race, racism, or counter-racism, about saying anything that you want to, no matter what it is. That's each and every black person is qualified to do that. Sometimes black people ask each other, what are your qualifications for talking about racism? I'm a victim of racism. That's my qualification. I don't need another one. That's any black person anywhere, any non-white person on the planet is qualified. 10-year-olds, if they're talking about racism, they're qualified to say anything that they want to about race, racism, or counter-racism. What they say is just as valid as what anybody else says. Why? Because no one has solved the race problem. So you don't know where the solution is going to come from. So you don't criticize what another victim says. And the codified response is, he said what he said. She said what she said. And that's it. I have been asked on occasion, what do you think about what Minister so-and-so said? Or Reverend so-and-so said? Or that black leader up there, who is selling us out. What do you think about what he said the other day? I say he said what he said. He's qualified to say that. If it's about race, racism, or counter-racism, he's qualified. He or she. Say what they want to say. I say what I want to say, they say what they want to say. Now, when a suspected racist, a suspected white supremacist says something, now I might have a whole lot to say, and chances are I will have a whole lot to say. Ad infinitum. I'm not going to say they said what they said. That's reserved for victims of racism. Victims guaranteed qualification. They are guaranteed that qualification simply by being victims. That's absolute. Actually, that's the explanation. And I hope that it's clear.
I think it was very clear, or at least I hope so. I understood it well. I had that happen to me today, non-white person, loyal listener, but he sent an email and he asked a previous non-white guest on the show, asked her some questions about racism. She gave him the answers, and he mailed me the set of answers and said, what do you say? And I said, an admitted victim of racism said what she said. End of message. Yeah, not even getting into scrutinizing another prisoner of war. Have you seen where using VGQ can really do a lot to minimize conflict amongst non-white people, victims of white supremacy?
No, I haven't seen it I haven't seen that put to use on any significant scale, but I certainly use it. And every time I do, it does minimize conflict. There are people who have called me, and just wanted to argue ad infinitum. For hours on end. And I say, well, you're entitled, like I said in the book, you're entitled to your opinion, and I certainly can't denounce your opinion about any aspect of racism. Whatever approach you want to use will solve the problem. Go ahead with it. And I'll do what I can, to solve the problem and go ahead with it. And I think part of the solution is something like VGQ. That's why I thought of it. I'm not going to argue with another victim, another fellow prisoner, somebody that I'm chained to at the bottom of the ship. I can argue with them all day. At the end of the day, we're still on course to be docked at the next plantation. All of us arguing Negroes in the bottom of the ship, arguing about our chains. Whose chains are better than the other, or whatever. Or how we feel about NASA. Some people like NASA. Some people say they don't. So what? NASA is not chained. That's the main thing to remember. So what's the argument about? Might as well be quiet. When you're quiet, you might think of a solution of abolishing slave ships altogether. Why not think about that rather than just see who can out-argue the other person? Lots of black people, I've been to them, been in the forums. Usually that's the worst type of place, in my opinion. One of the worst formats is 10 and 12 black people. And I have been one of them, passing a mic around and talking about the plight of black people, in particular when we get to the point where we start talking about holding black leaders accountable. What are you going to do, hold them by the toe? What do you mean, hold them? Well, I suppose that means put them out of office. Oh, so they were out of office before they got in office. What kind of magic was happening then? So you put them out of office and put somebody else in there. Somebody else like who? And this is what I've said about the Obama phenomenon. I have a codified response anytime I'm asked about President Obama. If not Obama, who? And I say to black people who criticize President Obama, if not Obama, who? And then I might add just one word, you. I think that's adequate. I think that's something to think about. If not Obama, who? You? That's anybody, white or non-white. Where's this magic worker? Where is the Jesus Christ of racial solutions? Now somebody might say, well, Jesus is a solution. Okay, that's an answer. Now what do we do? That's the only question I have when that's the answer. If Jesus is the solution, what do we do? Do we do anything? See, because I'm not going to argue against Jesus either. Some people want you to do that. No. I'm just going to say, well, certainly that is something to consider, for sure, way up at the top of the list. But now, in the meantime, are we supposed to be doing anything? So if not Obama, who? You? If not Obama, who? Neely Fuller? If I was in the Oval Office today, the first thing I would have to do is exactly what President Obama is doing. So there's no point in changing from him to me. Now what does he do? He calls in white people and asks them, first of all, what's going on? And that's the first thing I would have to do. I couldn't call any black people in and ask them what's going on, because the one thing I would know for sure is that they don't know.
Wait a minute, Mr. Fuller. You're saying that black people do not know what's going on in the world, system of white supremacy?
I'm saying black people don't know enough about the system of white supremacy. The white supremacists run the world. Now, if black people know more than white people, we wouldn't be having this conversation. So I'm following logic. In order to know what is going on in the world, all the different places, all the different problems going on, and who's causing them by name, I would have to talk to white people, because black people don't know. If black people knew that much, we wouldn't be having this conversation, because that means that black people are really already in charge of the world. That's the logic. I'm talking about logic now. That's what I mean by follow the logic. Don't follow Neely Fuller any place. Follow logic. Logic would tell me that. We got a system of white supremacy. That means in order to solve problems, I'm going to have to talk to white people. Black people talk to each other all the time. You see the result. Black people have instant access to each other. But do we know enough about what is going on in the world without consulting any white people on anything? Our record doesn't show that. Just going by the record.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I want to thank you, Mr. Fuller. I think you just made the commercial for this program, The Context of White Supremacy. I'm going to play that as a sound clip where you said, if you want to solve problems, talk to white people. And I'm just going to say after that, the name of this show, Context of White Supremacy, we talk to white people. Going to be the commercial. Thank you. There was someone who wrote in before the program. They said they were asking a question. The question was, how do you prove to someone that a thing is true? And I thought I would toss it to you. How do you go about proving to someone that something is true?
By having them find out after you reveal it. See, it's just like someone telling me that it's raining. And I don't believe that it's raining. Well, now, that's a choice. I can say, well, you told me it's raining outside. I don't believe that it's raining outside. So I am not going to get an umbrella, and I am not going to put on a raincoat. I'm not going to put on any rain boots, because I believe it's 100 degrees in the shade outside. It's scorching hot, and it's not raining. And so I'm going out without any rain gear. Well, that's how you prove it. You go out without your rain gear. And sure enough, it may not be raining. The person could have thought that it was raining, or the person could have simply said something deliberately that was not true. So it's just a matter of you finding out. You have to put it to a test. I say that there is such a thing as white supremacy. There are people who say, I'm making it all up. And I say, well, go by your own experiences. Go by your own observations. And then tell me what's going on so that I will know. And if I have misled myself or been misled by someone else, then just show me the evidence so that I can see it clearly, and I will immediately take that path. Once I'm convinced that I was incorrect and that the other path is the way to go. But I haven't been shown that path. Not so far. I've just had people say, some people say that it's not so. And then I've asked, what is so? And I get no answer. Well, that's not adequate.
Again, Mr. Neely Fuller, Jr. I spoke with you about a week ago, and I was asking you, I've heard you on a lot of different programs, and I've heard you address the 10 stops a lot, and it just seems like non-white people, victims of race, kind of get stuck at the at the elementary level in understanding racism, white supremacy, we don't really seem to, get past the basics of trying to solve this problem. And you said that it's because we don't really have replacing racism, white supremacy with justice. Black people don't really have that as a priority. Could you share your views on that?
Yes, and then you just ask what the people want. See, everybody knows what they want, and that's what I mean by truth. You always go with the truth. Lots of people say that they want this and they want that and whatnot when they really don't want any such thing. Many people will not reveal what it is they really want, because a lot of people's wants are really not very extensive. But they don't want to say that their wants are not very extensive. When a person says they want a world of justice, that's like a cliche. So many people just won't tell the truth. They want, and then there are many, many people who don't know what it is they want from one minute to the next, except that they want different things at different moments. But usually it's something pretty accessible. And this is why the problem of racism is not solved. Because many people who say that they want to see the problem of racism solved, that's really not a priority, if they tell the truth. And I can understand that. But we should make it a priority, because when we talk about our problems, that's usually the problem that we really have. So in understanding that, we should say, oh yes, well, on a day-to-day basis is not a major priority, but I am going to do some of the things that will lead to it being a priority, because I'm going to try not to mistreat anyone, and I'm going to try to make sure that the person that needs help the most gets the most constructive help in everything that I do. Now, this is very fundamental, because in doing this, you are evolving a priority, because you do interact with people. That's the mathematics of it. You interact with people, so when you make that a priority, and just keep that in mind, in every move that I make, I'm always asked, wait a minute, am I mistreating someone here? Am I helping a person that needs help the most? In many cases, helping the person that needs help the most is yourself. So that should be easy. If you're black, in many, many cases, the person who is present who needs the most help will be yourself. So if you help yourself in a constructive manner, not by shooting a needle into your arm or something like that, get high on heroin, or run around trying to find some cocaine, that's not constructive help. Eat the correct foods if you can, get the correct amount of sleep. Make these your priorities. Just by these simple things, you are eroding the system of white supremacy. Because they're not hauling zillions of dollars worth of drugs around here for nobody to buy it. If people start buying it, you are messing with their business. And they will be most perturbed. So just on these things alone, doing constructive things, just for yourself, and not mistreating anybody else in the process. That's the focus. That's the focus. That's codified focus. Very simple. Very easy to remember. Doesn't call for a big meeting at all. Just remember those two things. They'll take everybody right where they need to go. We'll all wind up on the same page. And the problem will be solved, because the racists won't know how to deal with it. Because they can't. That's the solution. That's counter-racist codification at its best.
Mr. Neely Fuller, Jr., Context of White Supremacy, Gus T. Renegade, and Justice. Mr. Fuller, we had quite a few folks that called in. Is it okay to, if you take some questions from our callers?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to go right down the line. Excuse me. Person called in at 770. If you called in with a question for Mr. Neely Fuller Jr., you are on live.
Hello. Yes, I found Mr. Fuller's remarks to be quite thought-provoking and interesting. I don't agree with too many of them, but I would like to ask Mr. Fuller. He seems to posit this notion of the need to replace the system of white supremacy, and it's somewhat of a nebulous notion. In the United States, in what context would this replacement take place, and how would it manifest itself?
It would take place within the context of the system of white supremacy, which is global. See, when you say United States, that has nothing to do with the system of white supremacy. The white supremacists are the only united people on the planet when you start talking about color. And they are united against people who are non-white. There's three categories: white, non-white, and white supremacists. Many white people have adopted the philosophy of white supremacy, and they have become the most powerful people on the planet. So one thing in having that power, they pay no attention to labels like America, Africa, Asia. All these words mean nothing to them. Conservative, liberal, right-wing, left-wing, Islam, Christianity, Judaism. These things mean absolutely nothing to a white supremacist. But they will say that all these things mean something to them. But at the beginning and the end of each day, they believe in one philosophy which they practice to the hilt, and that is white supremacy, which means mistreating people based on color for the benefit of themselves. That's all it is. It's a system of royalism. So that's what they do. And they have done it very well worldwide. And they are the most powerful, the smartest people on the planet. They have evolved in the smartest and most powerful people on the planet. Where's the evidence? Everybody who is non-white caters to them. That's the evidence. You don't see anybody who's non-white that doesn't. And if I've missed something, it can be pointed out to me. But nobody's been able to do that yet. So I'm holding forth. White supremacy is still intact. Based on what? Neely Fuller? No, based on the evidence, if anybody goes and looks. And all you have to do is just look around you every day. You see the evidence. Wherever you are. Whether you're white or non-white, just look. That's all you have to do. Open your eyes and look at everything going on around you. And then come to your own conclusion. Not something that somebody said, you know, the Black Caucus or Nelson Mandela. You're not paying attention to any of that. Just use your own intelligence, your own eyes, because that's really all it takes. And just see what you're looking at. Everywhere you go, Brazil, Congo, Ghana, France, Morocco, Haiti, and see that what was said is either true or false. White supremacy either exists or it doesn't. I say it does. And evidence shows it. Everyday evidence. Everywhere.
I'm going to just double check to see if 770, if you had a follow-up question. You have a follow-up question for Mr. Fuller? Go right ahead.
Yes, sir. Again, okay, I appreciate his comments on how racism manifests itself. But again, I would ask, how is this system to be replaced, and with what, or is it to be replaced? What exactly would the replacement of this white supremacy system entail? Black faces in the places where white people are now, or what? I didn't really get an answer as to how this...
okay. Okay, I usually like to take one question at a time. That's probably why I missed the second part of your question.
Okay.
So the second part of the question is, how do you replace the system of white supremacy with justice? With the missing link, and that is a code that's tailored to the individual person. And I gave an illustration earlier. In every situation, just do your very best to speak up, speak or act when someone is being mistreated, regardless of who it is and where. That's number one, because this is the recipe for the concept of justice that we need to be putting into practice as a replacement for the system of racism. If we're going to replace racism, we need to replace it with something of value. Justice is better than racism. That's the theory. So we can put that into action. Now, what is justice? Guaranteeing in every situation, when you see it looks like somebody's being mistreated, point that out. Wait a minute. It looks like somebody's being mistreated here on the job. Well, who is it? Well, it looks like it might be Henry over there. Looks like Henry is being mistreated. Let's go and see and look into it and see if this is really what's happening. Is Henry being mistreated? Yes or no? Because either he is or he isn't. Okay. Now, the other thing is, does Henry need help? If you find out he's not being mistreated, is he the person in here that needs the most help? The most constructive help? Is Henry in need of constructive help? And what help can we give Henry since he's here on the job with us? It's a very simple formula. If every non-white person, every black person just did that in every situation they found themselves in, every situation without exception, the system of white supremacy would begin to fall apart big time, because that's one thing, or rather the two things, we don't concentrate on doing. We just go with the flow. But if we just start practicing that, simply, and put it in the form of a question. See, don't make a declaration, because then you have to go on the defense. You put it in the form of a question. Is Henry being mistreated? That's a question. You don't say Henry is not being mistreated or Henry is being mistreated. Now you have to go on the defense, because people will come at you when you do that. Remember, see, it's a formula in counter-racist codification, counter-racist science. And part of that formula is the person who asks the questions always has the advantage. That's important to remember. The white supremacists understand that. That's why they usually like to turn the tables. Even when you ask a question, they like to take the question away from you, and then they form a question. Are you saying that Henry is being mistreated? That's the way they'll go with it. And then you stick with what you were doing. Stick with your format. You say, no, I'm not saying that. You answer the question. No, I'm not saying that, because that's not what you said. You ask the question, is Henry being mistreated? And shouldn't we look into it to see if Henry is being mistreated? Well, do you think he's being mistreated? See, they'll ask you another question, because they know that whoever asks the questions has the advantage. But you answer the question. I don't know. That's why I'm asking the question. Is Henry being mistreated? Until they finally have to come to the conclusion you're not going to deviate from your question. And then most likely they'll say, well, we'll look into it and find out. Okay, that's fine. That's the way you want to go. And then the next thing, after that's settled, if you determine that maybe Henry isn't being mistreated, it might work out that way, then you go with number two. Number two, talking about justice now. The second part of justice is, does Henry need help? Does he need the most constructive help? Out of all the people around here, does Henry need help? It looks like he's always being accused of falling behind on the job or on the work or something like that. So maybe Henry, how is he falling behind? See, stay in the question lane, Oh, well, he doesn't know too much about, certain parts of the computer operation. Oh, okay. Why is it that he doesn't know? Say, well, when we had the training course, he was out sick. Oh, that's the reason. Then Henry needs help the most in making up for the time that he was out sick. He couldn't help getting sick, could he? Stay in the question lane. We all might get sick, mightn't we? See, stay in the question lane. And they'll say, yeah, has anybody else here been out sick during a training session? Well, yes. Oh, okay. Well, we're talking about justice here. Are we? Stay in the question lane. Now you can help Henry. Now, all over the world, if every black person did that, whether you know it or not, you would be eroding the system of white supremacy, because the system of white supremacy is about beating up on people. Every chance you get. They call it raw competition. What it is mistreatment. The practice of slavery is raw competition. And it shouldn't be praised, because it's a form of royalism. It's a form of holier than thou. And it makes one person think that they are better than the other person, and that the other person is somebody that you threw away. And we're not supposed to have throwaway people on this planet, whether they're on your job or my job, or a bunch of people who had an earthquake who need all kinds of help. The most that should be given by the people who have the means of helping them the most. That's the logical way of producing a product called justice. And by proxy, it's the reason for being on this planet, according to logical evidence. If you're not doing that, you're taking up space. You're breathing air that you don't deserve. That's a lesson that all of us need to learn, and we're not learning it under the system of racism.
Let's see, we have 215. 215, if you have a question for Mr. Neely Fuller Jr., you are on the air. Go ahead with your question.
Well, my question was going to be, why was the system created? But I guess after hearing what you had to say, it really doesn't matter. It's just about putting forth that personal effort to try to bring about justice in every situation, and that'll start to put a dent in the process. So for people who say, what is it that we should be doing? How can we, it's not really a defeatist type of philosophy, if you want to say. It's just something that's based on reality, that there is something that you can do as an individual to erode the system of white supremacy. So that's about it.
Yeah, I hope I understood the question. Can you capsulize that question?
He didn't have a question. He said that he was going to ask about why the system of racism, white supremacy was created, but he said that in listening to you, you explained that, we should really be focused on how to replace white supremacy with justice, and he understood that from listening to you. Someone called in at 404, area code 404. If you have a question for Mr. Fuller, you're on the air, 404.
Yes. Hi, Mr. Fuller. My question is, do you think Chinese people in China are aware that they are living under a system of white supremacy? Do you feel like the government, like the Chinese government, is aware that they're living under white supremacy?
I don't think so. I don't think most of the people on the planet, and that would be non-white people, because I think most of the people on the planet are non-white, unless I've been misinformed. I don't think that they know that there is a system of white supremacy. I think most of the people on the planet don't think about it in that context at all. They just think that there are some people somewhere that they call capitalists or communists or socialists or right-wingers or left-wingers or just people who are out to snatch and grab stuff. And I think that's the way people think about people. And I don't think they think that there's a cogent system, a very smooth-running system that's in place based on mistreating people based on color. I don't think most of the people on the planet think of that in that context at all, including many black people here who talk about on their jobs and everywhere else the problems that they are having based on color all the time, in the schools, in all the areas of activity, economics, education, entertainment. Entertainers complain. Labor, people in labor unions, people that don't have labor unions, same thing. Law, in the courts and all like that, people complain. But when you say, now, couldn't this be a system that's working all of this? Since everywhere you turn, you run into it, some type of argument about color. Could that not be a system? I don't think most people think of it that way. Politics, religion. Yet, here it is, 2010, and in this area of the world, we have a religion called Christianity. And in that religion, we have a lot of people who call themselves Baptists, and they'll say color doesn't make any difference. Yet they will flock to a church every Sunday when they look around at the congregation. Everybody's either white or everybody's black. Yet we say color doesn't make any difference. Well, what kind of magic is this? Particularly when everybody's calling themselves a Christian. Who calls themselves a Christian? And here it is in 2010, and you still have such a thing, a cliche, something that's readily accepted as valid, called black church. Black people themselves say, oh yes, someone is burning down the black churches, not the Christian churches, the black churches. Now, what kind of church is a black church when everybody is supposed to be one in Christ? So I have heard. Black people and white people, when they see a church, they just go. I would think, if color didn't make any difference. But it's not that way, particularly when you start talking about Baptists. Why is that? What's going on? Has anybody noticed that? Does it mean anything? Those are questions. Maybe somebody has answers if I don't. I think it's racism. That's what I think. Somebody thinks it's something else, tell me what it is.
Someone called in at 111. Caller, your number showing up at 111. You have a hand up if you have a question for Mr. Fuller. Go right ahead. Your mic is on.
Gus, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Loud and clear.
Good show. I would like to use my victim guaranteed qualification to say I think Mr. Fuller, I think you have a great mind, and I just wanted to say that man, I'm a victim, so it doesn't mean much, but I just wanted to say that. I wanted to ask you about your definition of justice. Have you ever thought that maybe there is no way to guarantee that people won't get mistreated?
That's the question?
Yes.
Yes. I think that it's never been seriously tried, but I think it's possible. Now, I'll tell you why. I think it's possible if enough people adapt that concept rather than just say, it's no way they ever have justice. And that's an easy way to go, because people have done that about everything, just about, all down through history. People have said, and I heard people back in the 1940s, early 1940s, in barbershop talk, where a lot of black people do a lot of talking, black males do, about the world situation, as far back as I can remember. And they were talking about aircraft. And somebody made the remark that they heard that someone is designing a plane that was going to do 400 miles an hour. And other people in the barbershop said, no way. Anything that would go that fast would come apart in the air. That was early 1940s. Now, before 1945 had ended, World War II, there were several types of aircraft in level flight that were going over 600 miles an hour and were not falling apart. So the point that I'm making is a lot of things that all down through history where people say something couldn't be done, these things have been done. Going up into space now is taken for granted. That's almost like most people look at it when they hear about it. They don't even think about it. It's not even news. It's not even worth discussing. But a few decades ago, it was an amazing accomplishment. Does that answer the question? Yes, justice can be produced. Anything that people can conceive that they are able to do, they can do. They put their minds to it.
See, I think we got 916. If you have a question for Mr. Fuller, your mic is on.
Greetings, Gus. Mr. Fuller, this is Mr. Nero from California. Can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Great. Before I ask the question I actually had in mind, I have several, but I won't take up your time. I want to go back to what the first caller asked you in regards to replacing the system of racism with a system of justice, and you went on to discuss how non-white people, if they were to do all of the things that you suggested, that would have a great impact on eliminating the system. My question in regards to his question is, what would then white people have to do to eliminate the system of racism and replace it with a system of justice?
Now, if I understand the question, is what would white people have to do?
Yes.
Oh, what white people have to do, and I have asked white people to do it. Just talk to other white people. White people are around other white people all the time. All they have to do is just say, hey, let's forget about this race thing.
Mr.
Let's start doing justice.
I didn't mean to interrupt you. The people that called in, if you could turn your speakerphones off or turn the volume down, there's some distortion in the line. I would really appreciate that. Just turn your no speakerphone and turn the volume down. That would be great. Thank you. Thank you. I apologize for interrupting you, Mr. Fuller.
No,
Hello?
no problem. All white people have to do is talk to other white people. In fact, you ask the white people that you know, please talk to other white people about the concept of justice and making it real, because white people can make the concept of justice real faster than anybody because they're in position to do so. They know more about how racism works than anybody. So they can talk to other white people and say, hey, we've had enough already. Let's try the system of justice. Let's take credit for having done that. And, and it doesn't make any difference who takes credit for it, because justice should have always been in the first place. So we're not looking for credit. We're looking for a product, because racism never should have interrupted the activities of the people on this wonderful planet for this long, and stopping them from realizing and making real the concept of justice. Racism has been the biggest stumbling block for as far back as anybody who is breathing now can remember. There's been stumbling blocks all along the way, because producing racism has never been taken seriously. Producing justice, rather. Correction, big correction. Producing justice has never been taken seriously by anybody. But it's...
Hello? Hello? Yes. Mr. Fuller? Gus? Hello?
Hello?
Is
justice.
Can anybody hear me?
I can hear you, sir.
Yes.
Yes.
Hey, Mr. Fuller, we couldn't hear you there for a moment.
Okay, I'll repeat it. Yes, white people. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
You can hear me now.
I can hear you now. You clipped out for a while. I heard you break down the explanation of white people explaining to other white people in regards to eliminating the system, and that we should try this thing called justice. So are you basically saying that after non-white people begin to change their behavior, we basically ask white people to change their behavior?
You ask everybody to change their behavior and center on making the major focus in their existence the production of justice. See, when we talk about things like this is so-called Black History Month, when we ask black people to recognize black people's history and things like that, that's a long way around, because they will go along with it to a degree, but they do it reluctantly, because they're saying, well, you're looking for us to praise black people for their accomplishments, so we'll applaud black people for their accomplishments, but that's not really what you're trying to do. See, always go for your biggest objective. See, we can bypass a lot of stuff. We don't really need that. We don't really need black people, white people, to recognize things like black people invented stoplight and et cetera, and things like that. We don't really need to inform them of that, because that's short-lived.
I would agree.
Hello?
I would agree with that, sir.
Yes.
Mr. Fuller, I don't want to take up a lot of time, so let me ask my question actually, real quick. And I'm asking this because I get this a lot from black females. What do you say in regards to gender being the number one system of oppression on this planet? That oppressing women is far more prevalent than the system of racism. That it's more pernicious, and that it affects far more women on an everyday basis, impacts them more than white supremacy.
Okay, if you will check the code book, you will see that I say that people are motivated, first of all, by the system of white supremacy, and second, by sexual considerations. Race first, and then the sexual consideration is the other consideration. And there's a lot of conflict. Racism is about conflict, and sexual considerations is about conflict. And black males, in particular, since they don't know what to do about white supremacy, they have a tendency to turn on non-white females, turn against them out of their frustration. See, and that's a sort of a knee-jerk reaction, because when a person feels weak, they look around for someone who they perceive as being weaker than them, and then they go after them. And this is why you have situations like you have all over what we call the mother continent, like in Uganda and the Congo, where you have great misuse of black females. That needs to stop. We need to admit our weakness and our failure to grow into men, and our status as boys under the system of white supremacy. Admit that, and then remedy that, compensate for it by treating black females as equals. In other words, as partners, as people chained together at the bottom of the slave ship. One can't dictate to the other. So be partners. You don't demand anything, ever. You're not qualified to. You ask.
Okay.
She asks you to cooperate with her. You ask her to cooperate with you. Now, if you can't see eye to eye, then you get somebody that you can see eye to eye with. You can find somebody if you put it on that level.
Okay. Now that speaks to
hang
black
on, Mr.
males.
Nero, Mr. Nero, hang on, please. We got a couple
I'm
of
sorry.
No problem.
I'm so sorry.
310. If you had a question for Mr. Fuller, go right ahead.
Yes, I do. Can you get to me?
Yes, sir.
All right. This is 310 here. I've got a question for Mr. Fuller. I wanted to get, here's my question. Why do you think it is that blacks, as compared to other peoples of color, with almost little exception, seem to be, or at least in the American branch of this global white supremacy system, seem to be the most, attacked, the most despised, the most, vilified? What do you think the reason for that is? What do you think is at the root of that?
Well, different places. Well, I would say it's just in this area of the world, you call it the American branch. Actually, it's no such thing as America first, but that's another subject. But in this area of the world, what we call the Northwestern Hemisphere, it's no different than it was in the Congo. Back when the so-called people who were called Belgians, King Leopold, if you read the record of the things that went on there, it's extremely vicious. This is why you hardly have people who know about anything except misery in what we call the Congo. They used to call it the bloody Congo because there was so much bloodshed there. And
I think
you look up some of the history of the area. I mean, the record is terrible, and of the white supremacists who operated in that area, and it still is. It's just that the people have been beaten so down into submission that you can hardly call, like you can almost any place where you find black people, you can't call it a country. You can't call anywhere where black people are a country, like you can't really call any place under the system of white supremacy a country. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
I think you misunderstood maybe I misspoke or you misunderstood my question. I was meaning why blacks why us in comparison to peoples of other colors seem to be more treated more harshly. There seems to be even more of a war essentially against us, more so in comparison to other peoples of color, or at least here in America. But I would expect in certain other parts of the world as well. I wanted to get your thoughts on that. Why do you think that is the case? What do you think is at the root of that?
Because the white supremacists have chosen to do so. But it depends on the degree of harshness. It depends on what the black people are doing at a particular place. See, the white supremacists determine who's going to get the worst treatment at any given moment. And they have meted out quite a bit of harsh treatment to what we call brown, shades of black, the yellow shades of black. People all over the world have felt the brunt of the white supremacists' viciousness, regardless of their shade. I mean, it just seems that maybe the people who are classified as black in this area of the world is catching the brunt. That's because, where you are, you might get that impression. And at a given time, you might be catching the greatest brunt of harsh treatment. But then when you go to other places, you will find that those people, too, are being treated harshly in different places. And then there are some places where it looks like the people are not being treated harshly at all. See, it depends on what the white supremacists want to do. In some places, they just use some mild deception because it's good for their business. White supremacy is a business. And in other places, they crack down on people, almost every minute. Depends on what's good for the business of white supremacy. And that will vary from time to time, almost from week to week. Depends on what their mission is.
Hang tight, 301. 215, I saw you had called before and you said you had a question and he answered it. Did you have another question you wanted to get in? 215? Okay, maybe they're just listening. I didn't want to keep Mr. Fuller that late. I know on the East Coast it's a little after 11 p.m. I guess, is there a final question? If Mr. Fuller, if you're okay with the final question, anybody?
Okay, I'll take one more question.
There you go. Last question, anybody?
I'll take it. I got a question.
Let's hear it.
I got a question.
Yes, let's hear it.
Okay. This is a follow-up question to what someone had asked earlier. I didn't feel like we got a clear response exactly, but maybe I misheard. But I wanted to ask Mr. Fuller, I certainly believe there's a global system of white supremacy, but sometimes I wonder if it's really the entire Earth, the entire world. And so I wanted to ask you, what informs you that China is under a system of white supremacy?
Well, the way I think that it's being handled now is through monetary systems. Now, how all of the intricacies of that, I don't understand myself. I was talking about it to someone today, and it was just being discussed in a very loose manner because the people that I was talking to about it didn't know very much about it. Because I don't think anybody knows about monetary systems except the white supremacists. They are the money masters. I have that in the book. They are the masters of everybody's money. So one way you control people without even seeing them is through monetary systems, because you set the value of what money is going to be, and you can control millions of people by doing that. When you can tell them what their food, where they're going to get their food the next day, and how much the food is going to cost in a particular village. When you can determine that, even if you're thousands of miles away, that's a lot of power. And the white supremacists apparently have been able to do that. They manipulate money systems and get everybody into that money system so that no one has a monetary system that's outside of what they do. They go all over the world and make sure that everybody is a part of their money package. And then they determine what money is and what the value of money is going to be. And that way you can control people by the millions just by the push of a button, because you can send all kind of spasms throughout the monetary system, throughout the world, just by pushing a button on a machine. One button that moves a couple of zeros over into another position. And everybody goes crazy and starts hacking each other to death, because now the price of everything is just gone haywire. Food, housing, fuel. People lined up at gas stations, and the gas stations are closed, and all this. And the white supremacists are masters of that type of manipulation. So that's power. That is real power. Magical power. Wow. Now, that's my opinion. It may not work that way, but it seems to work that way because it seems to happen so often. And it only stops when they come out, and announce, well, we think that we've gotten this straightened out, because they caused the mess in the first place. And when it's supposed to be straightened out, it usually is. And nobody did it but them. So that tells you something right there. There's always somebody with a white face that says it's a mess, and there's always somebody with a white face that says the mess is over. And prove it. By now, the gas station is open. And now you can get food where you couldn't get it before. Or now you can